Good evening, everyone. We're just allowing just a minute or so, make sure everyone can connect in, but welcome. Give it another minute or so and we'll get started. All righty, well, good evening, everyone. My name is Marcus Arnold, and I'm the MARTA project manager for the Campbellton Corridor Transit Project. I would like to thank everyone for taking the time to join us this evening and hear about the great things we've been working on as we continue to advance the project. MARTA, in collaboration with the City of Atlanta, is investing in high capacity transit in the Campbellton Corridor to improve connectivity, accessibility, and mobility in the southwest parts of Atlanta. We are very excited about this opportunity to come back to you and provide an update on the progress that we have made to date and obtain some critical feedback at this juncture of the project based on our proposed project alternatives in preparation as we continue to move forward to the next phase of the project. So before we get started this evening, it's a pleasure and an honor to welcome and introduce Atlanta City Council Member Marcy Collier Overstreet and Council Member Joyce Shepherd to say a few opening remarks.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for being a part of this extremely vital community outreach for something so major in our city, our Campbellton Corridor Transit Project. Our input is so important because it is up to us to let MARTA know what we would like to see on Campbellton Road. I am District 11, Councilmember Shepherd is District 12, which is literally on the same path in this corridor on Campbellton Road. And we are extremely excited about the innovative ways that MARTA is using to reach us and capture our viewpoint during these crazy COVID times. They've really made sure that they're doing all that they can between the questionnaires, the surveys, the videos, the online information on the MARTA's website. I just want to make sure that you all are spreading the word to all of your neighbors about being engaged with this whole process. And thank you for being here. This is still in the beginning stages, so I want everyone to stay energized, engaged, so that we can really see Campbellton Road look just the way we'd like to see it. So thank you for being here.
Good afternoon. Good evening rather. I'm Councilmember Joyce Shepherd. And as Marcy said, we share Campbellton Road together. I share the east part of Campbellton Road and she shares the west, or is it north-south? I think it's east-west. And so I'm excited to be here today. Number one, in terms of the commitment that MARTA has made. Marcy and I was at a forum actually a couple of days ago, and it was a forum where they were asking us as council members a lot of questions. And one of the questions that was asked to us was specifically around MARTA. And they were asking the question whether the 1/2 cent sales tax, whether or not this tax was viable, should we be asking for more? What is happening with MARTA? Is MARTA doing their job in terms of transit around the city? And one of the things that I really was involved with and entrenched with, wanted to say thank you all to, is the fact that this 1/2 penny sales tax is actually being used. That's what we're talking about tonight. The fact that we're looking at Campbellton Road, which is one of the fastest growing, or the ridership is one of the highest in the city of Atlanta, is that we're looking at how we can take that 1/2 penny sales tax and look at light rail transit or BRT, that we're engaging you as a community in terms of your tax dollars and what you're putting into it, and the commitment that MARTA's made to continue to do that. As Marcy said, even through COVID-19, I've been in workshops with MARTA in COVID-19 talking about not only Campbellton Road, but I also have a project on Cleveland Avenue and Metropolitan Parkway. So I want to stop tonight, first of all, to say thank you, MARTA, for what you do. And I want to thank you as citizens for coming and getting involved. I know people on Campbellton Road ask me a lot of questions, and I hope they're out there tonight listening and be ready, prepared to ask questions. But thank you, Marta, for bringing this forum to us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilmember Overstreet and Councilmember Shepherd, for your kind words and continued support for this project. So with that, we can go ahead and start getting into the presentation. Just wanted to start off with a few housekeeping items. The meeting purpose tonight is to provide you all with an update on the planning and technical work performed over the past year on the Campbellton Road project. The team has conducted extensive analysis to address both the project purpose and need for high capacity transit along Campbellton Corridor and to identify a locally preferred transit alternative as we continue to advance the project. We are at the key milestone at this point where we really appreciate and need as much feedback as we can get to determine what you see for your community and for Campbellton Road for a preferred transit alternative that will help Marta guide this decision as we continue to move forward. So with that, the presentation is being streamed live and will be recorded and posted in the project's virtual meeting room on June 18th. If you haven't had an opportunity, please take a moment to check out the virtual meeting room at http://campbellton.scoutfeedback.com. And that provides all the information that we're covering this evening. It gives you a little more opportunity even after the meeting to take some time to walk through a lot of the information. And also too, the virtual meeting room has a project survey where you can provide us some key input on the proposed benefits of implementing high capacity transit service, some of the supportive infrastructure improvements you would like to see to help provide connection and access to the new transit service, as well as transit mode preferences and station area concepts. Please encourage your friends, families, colleagues who are not able to join this evening to visit the virtual meeting room. We will collect feedback from the survey as well as any comments, questions we receive on the site through June 27th. Please feel free to contact us with any additional questions or comments at marnold-vhb@itsmarta.com, or you can submit your questions or comments at publichearinginfo@itsmarta.com. So the agenda for this evening will include myself, as well as from H&TB, our consultant team's project manager, Tim Casa, as well as other team members that will be providing a walkthrough of the agenda items this evening. I will be providing a project overview and summary of engagement activities conducted since the fall of 2019 when we started the process. Lauren Ryman will be covering the transit alignments, modes, and evaluation process. Tim will be providing a summary of evaluation results and walk through some polling questions to get your feedback and preferences, similar to what we're asking on our online survey on the virtual meeting room. And Winston Mitchell will be providing an overview of station planning concepts and types. Tim will then wrap up with the next steps on how you can continue to stay engaged, and we'll be facilitating a question and answer session following our presentation. So at this time, the project team will be turning off our cameras so you can focus on the information being presented. The Campbellton Corridor is home to established neighborhoods and businesses and is currently served by the MARTA Route 83, the second busiest route in the MARTA system. The corridor is approximately 6 miles, primarily along Campbellton Road between the Oakland City MARTA station and the Greenbrier Mall area, with the corridor continuing to the Bars Road Park and Ride. The project includes an evaluation of 2 high-capacity transit modes, bus rapid transit, or BRT, and light rail transit, or LRT, both offering faster, more frequent high-capacity service and operating in mostly dedicated transit lanes with transit signal priority enhanced stations, and other amenities at stations such as real-time arrival information and pre-board ticketing. This project also examines the economic development potential of the corridor by evaluating transit-oriented development, or TOD, and joint development strategies at proposed station locations. The Campbellton Corridor Transit Project began in the fall of 2019 to define the project goals and understand the needs of the community. We are currently in the alternatives analysis phase of the project that includes existing condition data collection and analysis, transit alternatives definition, as well as an evaluation of potential transit mode options and station locations. The end result of this analysis and the input received from you today, the community and stakeholders as a whole, is a locally preferred alternative, or an LPA, to be adopted by the MARTA board later this summer. The LPA will define the community's preferred transit mode and route, whether BRT or LRT, and will continue to advance through the next phases of the project implementation. Now, depending on the transit mode selected, service would begin, for instance, for BRT in 2028, and LRT, if it's LRT, in 2031. So there's a few differences in the time frame of the implementation, and these are basically due to some differences in the implementation related to the complexity of design, funding needs, as well as potential right-of-way impacts comparing the two modes that we'll cover in more detail later tonight. So who has been engaged? We have engaged over 460 people over both in person initially and then virtually since the fall of 2019. Engagement to date has been conducted with elected officials and representatives of neighborhood planning units, West Atlanta, Greenbrier Mall, Fort McPherson, and other key stakeholders all along the corridor. I want to emphasize that public and stakeholder input will continue throughout the project as the project continues to advance through the next phases of implementation. So what we've heard from you to date from input received, primarily through previous meetings and surveys that were conducted in previous public outreach efforts, include the following. These are the following top 3 project goals: improve transit travel times and reliability, increase access to high capacity transit, and promote transit supportive development. We heard strong support for both transit modes, whether BRT and LRT, but with the emphasis on faster project delivery and wanting to see this new enhanced service delivered as quickly and efficiently as it can. Other transit amenities were noted, including dedicated transit lanes. Enhanced pedestrian access and safety was also noted. The Greenbrier, Oakland City, and Delos stations were identified as priority station areas for development, redevelopment, and other access needs to these stations. And finally, minimizing impacts and disruptions to residents and businesses was also had strong support. So with that, I will now pass it on to Lauren to discuss the project purpose and need, proposed transit alternatives, and evaluation process.
Thanks for that introduction and overview, Marcus. I'm Lauren Ryman, a member of the consulting project team. And like Marcus, I'm going to turn off my camera now so that you all can focus on the content of the presentation. Thanks again for being with us tonight. I'd like to now give an overview of the project's key objectives and purpose for making a high capacity transit investment in the Campbellton Corridor. And really, these are some of the overarching benefits that high capacity transit can provide. And they include a more faster and more reliable transit option for residents and corridor users, greater mobility to access employment, education, housing, and other services, economic development and job growth along the corridor, and stronger regional transit connectivity generally. And these goals tie directly to the needs identified in the corridor, which I'll walk you through on the next slide. The next slide shows the needs that have been identified. Thanks. This slide shows the needs that have been identified in the corridor. Route 83 today carries more than 4,500 riders a day, which demonstrates the current high transit demand that already exists in the corridor. And MARTA is focused on supporting these existing transit riders. Today, also, unfortunately, there are more than 400 crashes on the corridor annually, and MARTA intends to improve safety along the corridor with the investment that they'll make in transit. MARTA also aims to meet the needs of those who rely daily on transit in the corridor, particularly those special populations like seniors and students and lower income households. And finally, there is a need to try to capture opportunities for economic development and growth, as there are a number of underutilized commercial properties in the corridor. On the next slide, I will talk you through the alignment and station locations that are proposed for the corridor. The Campbellton Corridor extends from the Oakland City Station on the east to the Greenbrier Mall area on the west. And this is also the location where the western alignments diverge to terminate at the Barge Road Park and Ride. Both alternatives have been are being considered for 9 proposed station locations as shown on the map here. And as Marcus mentioned, MARTA is evaluating 2 modes for the Campbellton Corridor, and these include bus rapid transit, which is shown in blue on the map, and light rail transit, shown as LRT in orange. The proposed BRT route would follow the Greenbrier Parkway alignment to Barge Road and use the existing roadway. As part of the early planning steps that were taken, it was identified that a more feasible and a more realistic light rail alignment would be a more direct path to the Barge Road Park and Ride. So the proposed LRT route would operate on a new exclusive transit way that goes over both Langford Parkway and I-285 to access Barge Road Park and Ride. On the next slide, I will give you a bit more of an overview on these 2 modes. Both BRT and LRT are both high capacity transit modes, and they really have more similarities than differences, as we've tried to highlight here on the screen. BRT uses rubber tire vehicles, and they would operate on the road as automobiles do today. LRT is a steel wheel vehicle that operates on tracks that are actually fixed within the roadway. And both BRT and LRT vehicles can carry large numbers of people at a time, and both BRT and LRT alternatives are proposed to operate with the same service plan, meaning that transit will arrive every 10 minutes, whether it's BRT or LRT. And both modes would have improved stations with a high level of passenger amenities, including enhanced shelters and level boarding with raised station platforms and ADA accessibility, off-board fare collection for easy boarding and payment, and real-time arrival information to keep users and riders informed on when the next transit vehicle will arrive. So now, on the next slide, I want to walk you through the evaluation process. The planning process to evaluate transit options on the Campbellton Corridor began in the fall of 2019 and was comprised of 2 main phases leading up to determining the locally preferred alternative, also known as the LPA. The evaluation process began with a high-level Tier 1 analysis, which is indicated in blue on the screen. And this screened and identified the best performing type of transit way and transit alternatives. The Tier 2 analysis followed Tier 1, shown in orange, which is a more detailed second step in the process that will result in the selection of the LPA for the Campbellton Corridor. And the next slide gives you some additional detail on the activities in both Tier 1 and Tier 2. Shown here with Tier 1, this analysis defined the alternatives really based on where and how transit should operate. For how, the transit alternatives in Tier 1 were defined as either dedicated transit lanes or shared transit lanes. Dedicated transit lanes use some form of design, whether that be delineators or paint, signage, or even a physical barrier or some combination of those to restrict automobiles from entering the transit lane, thus removing congestion from the transit lane and any associated delay that may cause in slowing down transit. The shared lanes, on the other hand, allow automobiles to share the lane with the high capacity transit vehicles. So in addition to evaluating how, Tier 1 also evaluated where transit should operate. And transit can either operate in the curb lane, as local buses do today on Campbellton, or it could be center running, where the transit vehicles and the stations are located in the center of a roadway, more like a median. And Tier 1 concluded that using a combination of dedicated and shared lanes best balanced the benefits of transit while also limiting the impacts to the corridor and the surrounding businesses and residents. Tier 1 also concluded that both center running and curb running are feasible in the Campbellton Corridor. The final component of Tier 1 assigned these preferred modes of BRT and LRT to the recommended transit ways, defining where and how transit should operate. The mode assignment considered travel time and reliability, safety and public input, operational flexibility and other impacts to basically assign these modes to the potential transit way configurations. The Tier 1 analysis concluded in the fall of 2020 and resulted in center running LRT and curb running LRT, which progressed into the Tier 2 analysis shown in orange on the screen, which is really a more detailed evaluation of the alternatives. The Tier 2, which we just undertook, included engineering, a detailed evaluation of traffic impacts using a traffic simulation model, evaluation of property impacts, and it also included preliminary cost estimates. And so the public input gathered at this stage that we're undergoing now will help MARTA determine the locally preferred alternative, also known as LPA. And the LPA will be based on the alternative that best addresses the project goals and has the highest level of community support. Additional information on the BRT and LRT alternatives will be provided by Tim, and I will pass it over to him.
Thank you, Lauren. Before I begin, I want to express our apologies. We are experiencing some technical difficulties with our live stream YouTube. We are currently working on it. So for those of you who are trying to look at this on YouTube at this point, please be patient. We're working on it, and hopefully the situation will be resolved soon. As Lauren said, I'm Tim Casa. I'm the consultant PM for the project team. I'm going to turn my video off and spend the next few slides discussing the evaluation results. You've heard Lauren describe the methodology and the evaluation process, how we approached both alternatives. I'm going to deal with each one of them to actually help you understand the trade-offs between BRT and LRT. And as you will see, both alternatives perform very well. They present a lot of benefits, but they have some differences, and I'm going to walk you through those. So before we go deeper into the bus rapid transit, also known as BRT, let's just go over some of the basics. The BRT alternative connects all 9 potential stations. It's mostly curb dedicated lanes. The BRT compared to the LRT alternative is slightly longer. It's 6 miles. It also has a headway of 10 minutes, and it's an articulated bus. Let's dive into some of the key performance measures that we use to compare both alternatives, BRT and LRT. We're dealing with BRT. So from travel time, from the Oakland City train station to Barge Road, we calculated it to take 19 minutes one way. This represents 33% faster travel time compared to the current Route 83. The next key performance metric is our property impacts. High capacity transit alternative such as BRT will require some sort of right-of-way impacts to build the actual transit way as well as building the stations. We estimated that up to 2 acres is needed for the BRT alternative. As far as a bus facility or vehicle storage, we can always already use the one that's currently exists today. So there would not be a need to build a vehicle storage facility for the BRT alternative. Keep that in mind when I go to the LRT, and I'll walk you through the differences as well. Just take a note of that. The next I want to talk to you about are the roadway access impacts. With the curb running, there's going to be driveway restrictions in order for the BRT alternative to work. And we've estimated up to 20 restricted driveways. And as you see here, you're prohibited from making left turns. So mostly you're going to have a right turn in and a right turn out. I'll give you an example. If you pull into a business and you have to turn in, to make a right turn into the driveway, to exit, you must make a right turn. Left turns will be restricted at certain segments along the corridor. We're also estimated up to 21 driveway closures. On a few slides from now, I'm going to go into further detail on how those driveway impacts commercial as well as residential properties. Safety. The BRT, we had calculated that it could result in an 8% reduction in speed for auto vehicles. What that means, the slower the auto vehicles have to go, it has a positive relationship in terms of making it lowering the incidence of crashes. With that being said, it also provides an enhanced bike impaired environment through the design features for BRT. Last but not least, the cost and time it takes to build a project. We calculated the construction cost for the BRT alternative to be $100 million. The annual operating cost would be $5 million. And we're estimating for the time to construct the alternative would take 5 to 7 years. Now that we've dealt with the BRT, let's move over to the LRT. Starting with, this is a center running dedicated lanes. As you can see, the alignment for LRT is slightly shorter, 5.5 miles compared to the 6 miles for BRT. It too runs a 10-minute headway for weekdays. And the vehicle, it puts you in the mindset, picture the current Atlanta streetcar. That will give you a good example of what the vehicle will look like if we went with LRT. It too connects to all 9 potential stations. Travel time. The LRT, light rail transit, is slightly faster than the BRT by 3 minutes. BRT took 19 minutes from Oakland City to Barge Road. LRT shaved it by 3 minutes to 16 minutes. It has a faster travel time compared to the Route 83, a 44% faster rate. Property impacts compared to the BRT. LRT has up to 12 acres needed for property acquisitions and property impacts compared to BRT only being 2. As I was describing in the BRT, for the light rail transit alternative, a new rail facility to store the vehicles will be necessary. And that's also being studied as well for potential sites for vehicle storage maintenance facility. Roadway access impacts. Restricted driveways. It too will have restricted left turns, but we've calculated up to 144 restricted driveways. Driveway closures up to 12. Similarly to the BRT, it also reduces auto speed significantly more, up to 29% reduction in speed. As well, it will also have an enhanced bike ped design element as well as the BRT. Last but not least, the cost and time it takes to build the project. Construction costs $340 million compared to the $100 million for BRT. The annual operating costs $13 million, and the time to construct, we're calculating up to 8 to 10 years. I think right here, this is a good stopping point. We want to present some polling questions to all the attendees. If you could take some time to give us some feedback. We're going to present 2 questions, give you about 30 seconds each for each question. I'd like to go ahead and open up the polling questions now. Thank you. First question, what's most important to you when comparing the potential benefits versus the impacts of implementing high capacity transit? Please select all that apply. Again, this is multiple choice. Okay, about 10 more seconds for that poll question. Thank you for those who have participated. And we can wrap that up and see what type of results we've had for poll 1. Okay. So most of you have selected faster travel time as being probably most important in terms of getting the most support, and about an even split with respect to impacts to property and the amount of time it takes to build a high capacity project. Again, I can't say enough. We appreciate you providing your feedback in real time. I'm going to open up the floor now for the next polling question. Again, taking 30 seconds to give us your feedback. We are definitely appreciative. What types of bike and pedestrian improvements would you like to see constructed to support transit improvements planned in the corridor? Select all that apply, and remember, this is multiple choice. Give it about 5 more seconds and we'll close the poll. And now we appreciate those who have provided feedback. Let's look at the results of poll number 2. Okay, so looking at the results, 73% of you multi-use, or let's just say this, 73% tallied up for multi-use bike pedestrian paths. There was very strong support for wider sidewalks. That's definitely a recurring thing we've heard from the kickoff for this project. And a significant number of you wanted separate bike lanes or cycle tracks. This is excellent feedback. We appreciate it. We're going to continue on with the presentation. Thank you for those who have participated in both polling questions. I'm going to spend a little bit of time going a little bit more detail on the driveway access impacts. Let's first deal with the map, right? So this is the Campbellton Corridor. Oakland City is up here to the north, Greenbrier Mile to the south, and Ben Hill Barge Road Station. The light green are the parts of the corridor where residential driveways are located. The purple or fuchsia, what have you, this purplish color, this is where your commercial driveways are located. And just to recap, center running transit modifies how you can access and operate along the corridor. The median for center running will restrict left turns. Left turns won't be able to be made except at signalized intersections. And just another brief recap, LRT will modify up to 144 driveways. It too will be right in, right out. BRT, only 20 driveways will be modified right in, right out. We've covered quite a bit of ground. I've given you the analysis, the trade-offs. Let's just do a recap before we proceed. So both alternatives present a tremendous amount of benefits. One costs more than the other. So let's go over the trade-offs. Faster trip. LRT is a little bit faster. It shaves off that time by 3 minutes. So you're talking about 16 minutes compared to 19 minutes for BRT. Which is more reliable? When we say reliable, the fixed guideway helps LRT be higher in terms of reliability because it has a fixed guideway, meaning only that transit vehicle can use that lane. So compared to BRT has a high reliability, but the LRT has a leg up because of the fixed guideway along the corridor. Moving down in terms of reducing speed for auto vehicles, both do a significant job at doing that. The LRT reduces speed by 29%, BRT reduces it by 8%. Both alternatives, mind you, help improve safety. When it comes to access to businesses, both will have an impact, but LRT, because of the infrastructure and the location of the alternative, it's going to have a higher impact. 144 driveway restrictions compared to only 20 for BRT. Moving on down to property impacts, it's the same principle there. Both will involve some level of property acquisition and impacts. LRT, light rail transit, will have a higher estimated impact with 12 acres compared to only 2 for BRT. Moving on down to the resources required. LRT costs $340 million. BRT costs only $100 million. The cost annually to operate the alternatives, LRT is $13 million, BRT is $5 million. Last but not least, both will take some time, considerable time to build. LRT is slightly longer, going from 8 to 10 years, compared to BRT requiring only 5 to 7. We're at that part of the program where I want to turn it over to Winston Mitchell. He's going to discuss with you the stations along the corridor.
All right, thanks for that introduction, Tim. As you said, I'm Winston Mitchell. I'm another member of the team, and after introducing myself, I'm also going to be turning off my camera as well so we can focus on the material. So what you see here is a conceptual rendering of what a future transit station might look like along the Campbellton Corridor. So these conceptual renderings have been created for both alternatives to help imagine what enhanced transit investments and future land use changes could bring to the corridor. Here we have a future redesigned streetscape and what it could look like around a BRT transit alternative at Deloe Drive. You can see in the graphic that there are red special bus lanes on each side of the street, which will help buses move efficiently between stations by limiting general traffic. The stations are larger and enhanced compared to standard bus stops, and they include passenger amenities and are fully accessible with platforms that provide level boarding to walk or roll straight onto the bus. This view also shows potential new development that could occur, such as denser neighborhood-scaled buildings, which are brought up to improved sidewalks and a more walkable traditional neighborhood layout. Now, if we go to the next slide, we have a similar rendering for the LRT station. Here you can see that the future streetscape near Myrtle Drive would actually have the trains traveling in the center of the roadway in a transit-only space, with an outside lane that's available in each direction for cars. There are large boarding platforms in the middle of the street to allow easy access and safe crossings. And the LRT stations are also fully accessible with platforms that provide level boarding to walk and roll right onto the train. As with the BRT alternative, new investments in transit would support new development that includes denser neighborhood scaled buildings, improved sidewalks, and again, a more walkable and traditional neighborhood orientation. So I have one more poll question for you that's going to pop up. And so based on what you've learned today during the meeting, which transit mode do you prefer so far, BRT or LRT?
We have about 10 more seconds left. We appreciate those who are providing feedback to the poll question. Thank you. Thank you for those who have voted. As you can see, LRT, the LRT alternative at 60% of the votes were BRT, 40%. Thank you again for those who have participated in the poll. Winston, I'll give you back the floor.
All right. Thank you, Tim. So the images that we've been looking at show what new development might look like, but we also want to talk about the development of a land use plan for the station areas, because this has been a really important component of this project. So I'd like to start with giving a brief overview of the progress we've made to date, show you where the process is now, and then let you know about the input that we would like to get from you, the community. So here you can see that in addition to determining the mode for the corridor, we've been working on a transit master plan. This plan will establish station locations, as well as provide direction and implementation strategies to guide future decisions around infrastructure improvements, land use decisions, economic development, and placemaking. Public feedback has been a critical component of this process, and various touch points with members of the public and with key community stakeholders have been used to identify key barriers and opportunities to station development along the corridor, identify and confirm potential station locations. And finally, community and stakeholder feedback was used to develop several potential development plans for each station area. But today, we need your feedback to develop a final preferred plan for each station. This feedback will be used to ensure that each station area plan is aligned to the community's ultimate vision for the Campbellton Corridor. As you can see in this next slide, there have been several themes that have remained consistent throughout all of our touch points with public and stakeholders. These include an emphasis on improved connectivity and particularly investments in wider, safer sidewalks. There's also been a desire for the station area plans to support the vision established by the public in previous planning processes, including corridor plans, station area plans, several livable centers initiative plans, and the Atlanta City Design Plan. We've also heard that the planning process needs to be collaborative and inclusive and explore a variety of policy tools for implementation. But the biggest thing that's been running throughout this entire process is that we've heard that everyone is excited about high capacity transit and optimistic about what that means for the corridor's future. So how are transit stations locations identified? A variety of factors were used to determine the locations for the new high capacity transit stations. These include a thorough analysis of previous planning processes along the corridor. The public feedback and community vision established in those plans was the foundation from which the analysis and station planning process began. We also looked at existing conditions, the connectivity needs of both current and future residents and transit users, and opportunities for new investments and economic development along the corridor. So here you can see that we've identified 9 preliminary station locations along the corridor, each located approximately half a mile apart. Each of these potential stations will respond to the unique needs of the surrounding neighborhood, and we recognize that this requires a different level of development and infrastructure investment at each station area. The same level of development may not be appropriate or even desirable at all station locations, but there are broad similarities between some of the stations, and these stations have thus been grouped into 4 buckets, which we've defined here as station types, each with similar levels of density, land use, economic development, and station amenities. These 4 station types, which were confirmed with the public in June of 2020, are neighborhood residential, neighborhood activity center, community activity center, and regional activity center, with neighborhood residential being the lowest intensity and regional activity center being the highest intensity. In addition to providing enhanced connectivity and infrastructure improvements, the new high-capacity transit line is also intended to support economic development and reinvestment throughout the Campbellton Corridor. New transit stations have the capacity to serve as anchors for this type of development, and this development that is oriented around a transit station is commonly referred to as TOD. While the overall scale of development around each station may vary, successful transit-oriented developments do share several key concepts. This includes development adjacent to the station that is dense and compact compared to its surroundings, and includes a rich mix of land uses at a variety of affordability levels so that people can work, shop, and go to school within walking distance of transit. To be successful, TOD also depends upon development of a great public realm with wide sidewalks, amenities such as lighting, street trees, seating, and bicycle transit. And while TOD is centered around a transit station, it is integrated with a variety of other mobility options, including pedestrian, bicycle, and vehicular transportation options. As I mentioned, each of these station areas has a potential to serve as an anchor for the surrounding neighborhood, and places within a quarter mile of a station were generally considered the station area where TOD is intended to be focused. Some earlier community planning processes in recent years have helped establish a clear community vision for the corridor, and the station area plans add a level of detail that takes this vision another step forward. These plans will include recommendations that guide decisions around land use, placemaking, transportation infrastructure, and economic development, and will include a variety of implementation steps to support these recommendations. So the map of the corridor that you saw illustrated the station locations as well as everything that falls within a quarter mile of each station. However, this is where we really need your feedback. In the Campbellton Corridor virtual room, we have a map that is just like this, where you can actually select each station to look in detail. There, you'll see 2 potential development plans that have been developed for each station, which can be accessed by clicking directly on the station. These 2 concepts represent different visions for potential uses and density at each station, and we need your feedback to determine the preferred direction. Your feedback will then be used to create a single plan for each station area that reflects the vision of the community. Please review the station plans for the station areas and select the option that you think reflects the best vision for the corridor. There will also be a comment box to provide additional thoughts and comments on each of these concept options. So after that plug, I'm going to go ahead and hand things back over to Tim to talk about some of the next steps.
Thank you, Winston. What's next for the Campbellton Corridor? Well, based on public input, as well as this meeting especially, select an LPA, a locally preferred alternative, as well as preferred station area plans. Next, we anticipate the MARTA board to adopt the locally preferred alternative summer 2021. There is quite a bit of work left for the Campbellton Corridor, so we're going to begin the next stage of project development, for example, the engineering and all the studies that's going to be involved with whatever LPA is chosen, BRT versus LRT. Both of those alternatives are going to require some final design as well as potential environmental studies. Next, develop strategies to implement the preferred station area plans. And last but not least is the ongoing coordination with the city, the stakeholders, and you, the community, as the project continues toward implementation. We have covered quite a bit of ground today, and I am we are all thankful for those of you who have participated in the polling questions, provided your feedback. Please stay engaged. These are the various ways of staying engaged. The virtual meeting room. Please go to this. This is the URL, campbellton.scottfeedback.com. You also can email your questions directly to Marcus Arnold or the public hearing info email address. Going back to the virtual meeting room, you're going to see the same materials that we provided today will be posted at the virtual meeting room. You can work at your own pace, understanding and diving in deeper to whatever area that you're interested in. Also, please join us at future community virtual meetings and share the news with your friends and neighbors. We're at that point of the program where we're going to do question and answer. The rules with that, I will read the question and I will assign it to a project team member where they will provide the answer. I want to also say we're going to try to get to all the questions, but we will be posting the Q&A from today's meeting up to the virtual meeting room as well. So that's another reason for you to make your way to the virtual meeting room to not only look at the project collaterals and information, but also look at a copy of the Q&A just for future reference. So going through the first question. Question was posed, how much have we raised from the half-penny sales tax to begin? Thank you for that question. That's something that the project team will have to coordinate with MARTA to give you an accurate revenue collected to date. So that will be posted on the Q&A at the virtual meeting room. Thank you for that question. Let's move on down. One question is, what examples of cost-effective LRT are you considering? Have you looked at the Atlanta streetcar example and the Charlotte model? I'm going to call on the project team member, Mark Fahey, who led the LRT design. Mark, would you provide a response?
Sure, Tim. I hope everyone can hear me okay. I'm on my phone right now. So we looked at examples from Charlotte and from Minneapolis, from Utah, various places around the country. And really in this corridor, it's unique because we wanted to keep impacts to a minimum for the LRT option, but it is quite tricky with all of the driveways along the route and the tight right-of-way. So we looked at ways to minimize the impacts to the roadway and adjacent sidewalks as best as possible, but keeping in mind that for the LRT to truly function appropriately in the way an LRT system should, we had to make certain considerations to ensure that it did that. So there are levels of impact that are greater, as Tim and Lauren described earlier, to the LRT versus the BRT option.
Thank you, Mark. While I have you, there's a similar question I'm going to pose to you too while you still have the mic. Did we look at any train models at the Atlanta airport also to help with exploring the LRT option? Did we look at the airport or other airport examples across the country?
No, we didn't specifically look at the plane train, might be what they're referring to there. We didn't specifically look at that, but we did look at, I think I mentioned earlier, we did look at how systems across the country did function and how the downtown streetcar works as well, to ensure that the LRT option was optimizing the corridor.
Okay. Thank you. The next question, what is the possibility of greater connectivity to both activity centers and MARTA Heavywell of extending the north end of the project to West End with an intermediate stop at the Beltline at Murphy's Crossing? I'm going to call on Winston Mitchell to see for his response to this question.
Sure. So that is actually something that we looked at a little bit. If you go to the virtual meeting room, you'll see that that's something in the two different options for Oakland City that we explore a little bit. Um, the LRT would have the option of potentially being integrated into future Beltline rail. There's actually a large lot that at one time had been under consideration for, I think, a vehicle site maintenance facility. But there's a spur from the Beltline that comes south down to that area. So there probably would be a little bit more flexibility for future planning as the Beltline transit system is expanded, at least in terms of having one continuous link. Whereas with a BRT option, if the rail is extended around the Beltline, there would probably be a transfer of some sort that would need to occur.
Okay. Thank you, Winston.
Mhm.
I have another LRT question. I'm going to pose this to Mark. I'll read the question. How will the LRT connect with the rest of the ATL streetcar system?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. So we studied one option for connectivity that essentially involved extending the LRT east of the Oakland City Station over across to Dill and then up an old rail spur over to Sylvan Road, Avon Avenue, and then it would theoretically connect with the Atlanta Beltline West Side Transit Loop or portion of the loop. From there, it would route east into the downtown core and connect with the existing downtown streetcar.
Okay, thank you, Mark. The next question is, will any right-of-way property be needed for either of these options? I can take that question. Yes, both alternatives are anticipating some degree of property impacts. BRT less than LRT. BRT is estimated to require only 2 acres and LRT 12 acres. Thank you for that question. Moving on to another one. Working my way through. One question is as simple. I think it's a good housekeeping one. We should have mentioned it earlier. Getting a copy of these slides. This presentation will also be posted on the virtual meeting room. If you're still looking at my screen, it's the one up here, http://campbellton.scoutfeedback.com. This virtual meeting room hosts quite a bit of information on the project, and that's going to be pretty much like the personal library for the project. So I encourage you to make your way to that virtual meeting room. A lot of information there for you. I'm going to making my way down through the questions. Here's a question. It's 19 minutes. They're quoting the BRT travel time, 19 minutes from Barge Road to Oakland City. The question is, why can't we have 9 stops and express? I'm gonna give this question to Nathan Barnett, a member of our team. Nathan, could you take this question?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that question. When we were looking at the service plan for this corridor, we were looking at both Route 183 and 83, and it seemed that when we were looking at both of these services and the passenger levels on these routes, as well as the travel time for both these routes, it was a good, I guess, combination of both express and local stop. So the Route 83, that route is about 30 to 40 minutes in the afternoon, and the 183 I think was about 20 minutes. So we found that this either the BRT or the LRT was a much shorter travel time than the existing conditions.
Thank you, Nate. This next question, these next 2 questions are somewhat very kindred. I'm going to I'm going to toss it to Marcus Arnold, Marta PM. I'm going to read the questions to you. First one is, can you extend the LRT westward to County Line Road? And the other one is very kindred, as I mentioned. Would there be any future plans to connect this project, whether BRT or LRT, to connect to other planned BRT or LRT plans in the area?
All right, thank you, Tim. Yeah, what we wanted to look at as part of the design of this corridor is providing opportunities that would not prohibit future extensions. We understand as the system continues to advance, there are opportunities and needs to continue to serve other areas of the region. So as you'll see in our design, we wanted to do is just allow for opportunities for future extensions if those projects are identified and funding becomes available, to make sure there's, you know, those connections can be operable with the existing project.
Thank you, Marcus. This next question, I'm going to toss it to a project team member, Eric Bossman. I'm going to read the question for you first. Can you tell us anything about the envisioned connection to Oakland City Station? The respondent said it is cumbersome to have to use the pedestrian bridge over US 29. Is it possible to disembark on Deal Avenue and construct a new station entrance on the north end of Oakland City Station?
Yeah, so Tim, Winston may want to weigh in on this as well, but we've looked at a number of different options at Oakland City about how to make that as seamless as possible. Absolutely understand that if it's difficult for folks to make the transfer from one mode to another, that it's going to be a less enjoyable experience and they're less likely to use it. So as we've looked at the station area plan for Oakland City, we've looked at a number of different configurations to try to figure out how to make that transition as seamless as possible from this route directly up to and onto the transit station. But you're right, obviously there are some physical limitations there. Winston, I don't know if you want to add any of the details of any of those things we've looked at.
Yeah, I would just say that that's probably one of the biggest design, you know, we're still at a very high level about what the design of a station would actually look like. And it would, to some degree, be based on what mode is ultimately selected. But we've definitely identified that crossing right there where Campbellton and Dill come together as the biggest pinch point. And, you know, part of this project is really putting investments into some of the pieces that support the transit station. So wider sidewalks, bike lanes, you know, better streetscaping, things that actually make it a pleasant experience for the pedestrian. And so those are the things that we're looking at as being the big keys to try and create some sort of surface level connectivity that right now really doesn't exist. But, you know, the details of that will really be hammered out once we've figured out exactly which mode we'll be going with.
Thank you, Winston. There's another question with LRT. Mark Fahey, I'm going to give this question to you. It says the rendering of LRT operating along the median did not show overhead power lines. Is this what's it going to be? I think he's referring to, or person is referring to the catenary lines. Could you speak to that, Mark Fahey?
Yeah, Tim. No, this system would use overhead catenary poles and lines. They're roughly at an 80-foot spacing. So while the rendering doesn't show that, it would have a look and feel similar to the downtown streetcar, where there are those overhead power systems suspended along the route.
Okay, thank you. I would say keep the microphone in front of you. There's one more that I want to, well, I'll say there's another one that I want to present to you. It says, have we looked at clearing out a tree alley through the neighborhoods for the LRT system?
You know, I'm not quite sure I understand the question there.
Okay. Well, we could take it offline and just the anonymous attendee, we can address that.
Yeah, I apologize.
Yes, no problem. We're going to try to address that when we post a Q&A up on the website, and hopefully we'll address the question that's presented to us. But thank you for that question. This question is going to come back to Winston Mitchell. Do you think if LRT is built on the Campbellton corridor, that it will open up possibilities for this also to be implemented in other parts of the city, including the Beltline?
Well, I guess the best thing that I could offer is that there are projects moving forward on the Beltline now. They're looking at LRT. So there was just a public meeting, I believe it was last week, for the Streetcar East. And so that would be an extension of the downtown light rail, the streetcar system, onto the Beltline on the east side. So I do think that if we implemented a similar system here, probably the biggest benefit to it being LRT would be the opportunity further down the road as the Beltline is built out to integrate them together. But anything that happens with that is probably a little further out. I mean, this is sort of the ultimate build out of the system. But I mean, the short answer is yes, we are looking at rail on other parts of the metro as well.
Okay, thank you, Winston. This next question deals with is a design question, and it's going to require you, Mark Fahey, as well as John Perlick, because it's dealing with both modes. Here's the question: have you looked into bus rail hybrid systems such as the ones used in Japan and the Netherlands? I'll pick on John Perlick first, and then we'll hand the mic over to Mark Fahey.
Hi, thank you for that question. So I can't speak to any specific examples in Japan or the Netherlands that were considered, but for some sort of bus rail hybrid system, I'd also ask maybe if Lauren Ryman is on the line, if she could provide input to this question. Lauren, are you aware of any consideration made for bus rail hybrid systems?
That was not a mode that we considered as part of the alternatives analysis. One of the things that we were looking at was continuity with other MARTA services and fleets as well, kind of thinking about the long-term vision of where MARTA would like to go. Technology is constantly evolving. So I do think, other modes could be identified in the future for MARTA, but the alternatives analysis for this project focused solely on bus rapid transit singularly and light rail transit singularly, but not a bus rail hybrid system.
Thank you, Lauren. We have time for one more project. I'm sorry, one more question, and I'm going to toss this to Marcus Arnold. Here's the question. Here's the last question for the evening that we can get to. Have y'all looked into the possibility of a similar LRT project along Buford Highway corridor between Lenox Road and I-285 as well?
We have not looked at a similar, you're referring to light rail. We have
Yes.
not,
Okay.
but we are starting to look at Buford Highway and understanding there's some opportunities for enhanced transit along that corridor too. So that's one of the corridors that MARTA is starting to take a look at and do a little bit more planning related to potential transit investments in that corridor.
Okay, thank you, Marcus.
Mhm.
Folks, we've gotten to the questions that were posed in the chat room. I want to take the time to reiterate that the full meeting will be posted on YouTube as soon as possible. We know we had technical difficulties with the live stream, and we will also post this on the virtual meeting room as well. I want to turn the floor over to you, Marcus, for any closing remarks. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Tim, and thank you everyone for taking the time to join. I know it's a lot of information that was provided, but hopefully some good information, and want to just reiterate, please take time to go to the virtual meeting room. All the materials are there. The presentation will be posted there as well. And the materials are also available for download too on the virtual meeting room. So definitely take a moment to go there and complete the survey if you haven't had a chance to. And again, thank you all, and Hope everyone has a good evening.